Welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar, Music Production 101 by James Patrick from Slam Academy. My name is Yan Pang, the Program Events Curator at American Composers Forum. Our webinar series is a partnership between American Composers Forum, Slam Academy, and Springboard for the Arts. Let's welcome James Patrick from Slam Academy to get us started.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the wonderful introduction, Yan. I'm really honored to be here, and I'm really grateful to ACF and Springboard and all of you people for coming and making this whole thing happen. I think we can have a lot of fun today and learn some cool stuff about music production, maybe go home with some nuggets we can apply to our own tracks or whatever. So yeah, this is cool. I think we should get started. I'm going to share my screen. So Yan, if you'd be so kind or to allow me the ability to do so. I should be able just to show this. Look pretty cool. Got a little slideshow to help guide us. Basically, what I'd like to do, first of all, like Yan said, is anytime you have any questions, because music production in particular is this like humongous topic, that just please interrupt and ask. But what I'm going to try to do is spend about half of our time doing some intellectualization, if you will, of this, like breaking down what the roles are of the modern music producer and all the different things you need to do or be good at, you know, like these definitions of what these things all mean. And then I'd also like to spend about half the session just clicking around inside of a software, maybe making some music, playing some chords or making some beats or whatever. So just to give you an idea of like actual practical workflows going on in a music producer's studio. I'm also going to try and contextualize most of this into like the coronavirus era. So a lot of this is going to be really try to twist on the DIY approach and really indie and at home. You know, a lot of these stay connected workshops are really geared towards keeping us all functional and connected and being creative during this strange time. So I'm going to try and do the same in this presentation. So yeah, I'm James Patrick, and I run a place called Slam Academy. And if you are interested, especially in making electronic music, or else, you know, creating electronic or instrumental backgrounds to your arrangements and compositions, or else learning how to do sound design or mix and master your own original works, Slam Academy is the very best place to learn how to do that stuff. So we have all of our classes are all online. We actually have free classes coming up all the time too. In fact, just about every day. So you can check us out at slamacademy.com. That's my quick little plug. And now I'm going to focus on the slideshow and do a little bit of chatting. So let's see if I can figure out how to navigate my computer. Let's talk a little bit about definitions. Traditionally, in traditional way back in traditional music, the composer writes a song for an ensemble or an orchestra, and if they're lucky, someday they would actually get to hear their piece. But today, obviously, technology has changed the way we create music, and we're going to take a few minutes to explore the various roles that you and others play as they relate to finishing a great piece of music. I think all the analogy, I don't know, I'll use, let's just pick a record. Let's do Michael Jackson Thriller. Let's just assume that everyone here wants to make Thriller or a record that's that good someday. Maybe you already have. If you have, send me the link because I'm curious. But I like to talk about Thriller as an example because Michael Jackson, you know, he's the artist and Quincy Jones is the producer. So we're going to do like some looking at kind of like Quincy's role in that scenario. Like what did Quincy do? And that's what you, at least in the more modern era, what the producer would do, like pre-coronavirus at least. So the workflow here, generally you start with the song. The songwriter is the first person in the creative process, and they use usually MIDI instruments and a MIDI keyboard along with some software, and they arrange their idea. They make these, this is called a demo. You know, if you're anyone at home making songs, you make a demo, you know, and this is like at least looking at the 80s and 90s and maybe even early 2000s, pre-coronavirus again. So the songwriter makes demos with MIDI instruments, and then the producer, the Quincy Jones, turns that demo into a radio-ready song through all these things we're going to talk about now. To produce a song, The producer, and this is like Quincy Jones, whoever, it isn't necessarily the best keyboard player, the best mix engineer, the best mastering person. No, usually not, actually. The producer just knows the right person or knows the right trick for how to fake it until the real thing can happen. So for instance, Quincy Jones, as the example, needed to know the best musicians in town and the best on his speed dial. He needed to know the best recording engineers, the best composers and arrangers too, and the best mix engineers and even record labels to help get the music into the hands of people. This is what a real producer does. The modern illusion is that the producer is somebody that clicks around with a computer and makes beats, and that they're a producer. And in some ways that's true. But if you're talking about a real producer, like if you go to Hollywood and say you're a producer, you're not just somebody that uses Logic or Ableton. That's not a producer. That's a songwriter. If you're somebody who makes your own music with Ableton or Logic or Pro Tools, you're a songwriter. You're a producer when you do these things. So here's my little thing, my quote, I guess. Here's maybe what you're thinking, but wait, I don't have $1 million and a team of professionals. I have a laptop and a good idea. And that's where this really is now going to try to, I'm going to try and twist this into the really like right now, how are you going to apply these things at home with your computer? In the modern paradigm, the producer wears all these hats. The person who has the song idea must produce it themselves. If you're the person with the Ableton or Logic making beats, you are the producer. You have to be, because you don't have Quincy. You got to be Quincy and Michael and the recording engineer and everyone else. So that means everyone from the previous slide, plus a comfortable space with nice lighting, all must come from within. This is like you at home, being the producer and being everyone. This is one of the biggest challenges modern producer faces, though. Honestly, like I work with thousands of people in 20 years teaching them how to produce their own electronic music. And one of the biggest challenges is all the different hats you got to wear. Because you're in the middle of trying to write a song, and then there's all this technology in the way, and you're becoming an engineer, but you're trying to like play piano or whatever. You're trying to like express an idea and not be a technician. But all this technology has changed things. You got to face it. So let's walk through the things you'll need to be good at yourself in order to complete your own musical work from home. You know what I mean? Like just to really rip something that's radio ready. Starts with an idea. Maybe it's words on a cocktail napkin. I'm getting poetic here. Or maybe it's the sound you hear from your instruments. But when the muse strikes, it is recorded somehow into your software. And this is usually where basic MIDI instruments and audio recordings come into play. And again, this is where most people kind of fall into categorically. If you have a laptop and you're making music, you're playing with a MIDI keyboard and you're singing or whatever, that's songwriter, right? So that's where everything starts. And that's where things should start. But the producer's going to do a pile of things to make it sound like a real song. The first thing is they're going to break that demo or the sketch up into proper sections. Song sections, they kind of have a standard flow. They usually go in like 4 or 8 bar chunks. And they're going to move in these basic sections. This is Music Production 101. This might be totally remedial for some of you, so please forgive me. But if you're making a song with lyrics, generally the flow, these are puzzle pieces that are meant to move around. But they're going to start with, you're going to have an intro, couple of verses and a chorus. Then you'll have a bridge somewhere snuck in there, usually before the last chorus. This is a standard workflow. You can listen to any Beatles song and hear they pretty much 99% of them are going to follow some similar structure. But if they're getting weird, they start with the chorus. That's we're going to talk a little bit about those sections in just a second and what they mean. But also if you're making instrumentals, you're going to follow a similar structure. If you're just making environments that just move around and stuff, that's cool. But it becomes a song that's like really produced when it has these nice sections. And even if it's a totally instrumental piece, oftentimes with electronic music nowadays, the words that are used instead of verse and chorus are like break, build, and drop. So every electronic music song nowadays that's commercially viable has a drop. And for some of you, you're like, duh. And for some of you, you're like, what is that? We're going to talk about that too. You can also look at other forms of arrangement now that still use combinations of these things. Like if you listen to like modern popular electronic music that's really commercial sounding, like an artist like Zedd is a very popular artist that's like all over Billboard charts and stuff. It's electronic music with a build and a drop, but there's lyrics, so there's got to be a verse and a chorus too. So that's a modern way to fuse things together. But let's talk about what is included in those parts. And I'm trying to move quickly because I want to get into the kind of beat making part if we have time, which we will. Within each of those sections, there's certain things that need to be really clear. And this is just producer 101. If you're going to take a beat that you made in Ableton or something and turn it into a track, you better start thinking like this. The verse section has a lot of space. If you're making song, all these tips right here are if you're making songs that are going to have lyrics. The verse section is going to have a lot of space for the lyrics to tell the story, mostly a rhythm section. And this is where the vocalist gets to tell the story. The chorus, though, is where all the harmonic instruments kick, and usually there's less words and there's a shorter phrase that's just repeated over and over. You know, this is maybe obvious, but this is the part of the song that you can sing along with if you've only heard it once or twice. And then the bridge is a little more mystical of a section. A lot of people don't really like write a bridge into their song if they're just songwriters, but the producer is going to know. It's going to say, wait, this is getting boring right here. We got to shift gears and go down a different street for a little while, is what's happening with the bridge. So when the bridge comes along, it's like, hold up, let's introduce some new instruments. Let's get rid of the old instruments just for a little while. And that's going to go ahead and evoke like a kind of new environment. And it's going to allow the song to feel like really resolved when it concludes back to that final chorus. And that is an essential function of a good song that's being properly produced. So it's kind of almost a little songwriter lesson in there for you. But for the next little set of tips, these are for electronic music or instrumental music. If you're making music that's not going to have lyrics, usually the music I make doesn't have lyrics on it. You're going to have an intro and an outro. You got to have some sort of maybe cinematic or non-musical section in the beginning and end, especially the beginning, of the song. A mark of an amateur beat is just where it just starts, just like a groove all of a sudden, like you're missing an opportunity. The break or the breakdown is a chance for the dance floor to take a break, you know, if you're making beats, or else it's a chance, this is where the drums go away, and this is when you get to introduce new musical elements. So a lot of this kind of instrumental music is meant for DJs to play. So the producer thinks about, where is this song going to be heard? Is this song going to be played at midnight on Friday night at a club, or is this going to be played, you know, while somebody's cooking dinner? And these kinds of decisions as far as how you're going to arrange the song all apply to that kind of thinking about the end game result. But when it comes to the introducing new musical elements in the kind of like in the bridge there, in the break or the breakdown, you do it there because the DJ is done mixing the song. So like as the DJ, you need to have a nice intro and outro section for the DJ to blend between the tracks before the breakdown or the bridge. When new musical instruments are introduced, it's going to cause clutter if you're mixing it with something else. These are the electronic music ideas. For all I know, no one in this room is making electronic music. If that's true, that I'm sorry to bother you with this, but these are fun things to consider. So then lastly, the drop. Oh no, I didn't get to the build. So the build is usually 2 to 8 bars long. All these sections are usually like 8 or maybe 12 or 16 bars long at the longest, but they move in these 4-bar chunks. And the build is usually a little shorter depending on style, and it's going to usually add, this for the tension, hence the name build. This is where you add tension. All the bass and low end goes away, and you have nothing but high end and shorter phrases, and usually tension sounds like sustaining ambient effects. Ambience is all in the build. That creates a sense of tension before, of course, finally the drop, which is when all the music, like usually when the band kicks, you know, that's all it is. All we're doing is we're composing 1 minute of material. I'm going to show you in my Ableton. I got a beat up that's doing all this. We'll look at it and we'll get to hear it in just a sec. Okay, cool. All right. Well, we're just clicking around here, seeing where this thing takes us. So those are things the producer would do with arranging the song. That was kind of the arrangement stuff. The other thing a producer would do is they're going to start switching out that MIDI. I originally called this slide Ditch the MIDI because MIDI instrumentation is for songwriters. Okay, it's just like a placeholder that helps you remember what you were trying to write. But when it comes to producing a song, you get rid of that MIDI stuff and you have real instruments play the parts, at least one. So you can have MIDI, maybe chords in the background or some pads or whatever, but as far as the lead instrument or the horn section, forget about that MIDI stuff. It sounds bogus compared to a real instrument. So if you want to make a sound totally captivating, you got to have at least one instrument in there, in my opinion, that's not just some MIDI stuff. So maybe that even means taking your MIDI tracks and turning them to audio and then further producing them. There's tricks in there too, but for now, let's talk about how you're going to make a song. Here's your workflow as a producer. Okay, so the producer, which is you, here's the demo that you made, and you know the perfect player, you, to play that instrument. And so the demo is sent to the musician so they can listen to it in the headphones and imagine how they would play their part. And then they get together in the studio with the producer and recording engineer, which is another person, you, and they perfectly position the mics, put headphones on the musician, light some candles, and get some good takes. And that's 4 different people now in the same room, and you're being all of them as the producer, you know? So instead of having them all on your speed dial like Quincy, you got to be those people. But at least we're just visualizing what these roles are and what they do, what these people do. So then normally they'll go home and the producer will have all the takes and like choose the best takes and comp them together. So that's kind of how you would swap out your MIDI instruments and replace them with audio using some sort of software, you know. So once you've got your audio takes all put together and everything sounds good, and again, I got a reggae song I made like a year ago sitting on my computer here, but it's all the trumpet and harmonica and all that. It all started as MIDI, and I'll show it to you in a sec. Okay. So, but because I feel like I'm talking a lot, but we're just getting through this. The recording engineer also takes time to work with the instruments to make them sound as good as possible. And this is usually happening with audio effects. I don't know if you guys are using Logic or Pro Tools or maybe Ableton or whatever software you're using, but it's going to come with a bundle of audio effects that's going to include all these things no matter what. So every software, they're all the same, does the same stuff as far as this, you know, really. At least on a simple level. So the EQ, all producers need to know how to use an EQ and know techniques with an EQ to make sounds be more clear. The EQ's role is to cut away the bad frequencies. Every time you record something with a microphone, man, there's so much junk in that recording, no matter what, especially on the low end, like with the bass. Like if you just listen to my voice right now, there's so much junk going on. I mean, it's insane. So, and you use the EQ to carve all that out of there. I'll show you how to do that just for briefly in one of these tracks, or how I did it maybe. That's the frequency spectrum. The next thing that the producer does with the effects is the compression, the dynamic range. And this is kind of a mystical thing to some people, but if you think about the peak of volume of a sound, that peak is pretty high compared to the quiet part. And by compressing a sound, you're decreasing the overall distance in volume between the top of the peak and the quiet part. In other words, making everything more the same volume all the time. And so the compression is important, especially in production, because otherwise it just sounds like a garage band or you're sitting in a room. The producer's job is to make it feel like this is a larger than life experience, and compression is essential there. I'll show you some of that and how I did it. Then we add distortion. This is literally an effect called a channel strip. In the old analog world of making records, the channel strip was just the devices in order. You start with an EQ on every sound and you cut away the bad stuff. Then you put a compressor on it and you turn down the peaks to make it all the same volume. Now it's starting to sound produced and not just like a live recording. Then you add harmonics. Saturation is the distortion category. And this happened through recording to tape back in the day, or overloading a guitar effects pedal. But either way, there's a lot of different ways to add analog saturation or clipping to increase the perceived loudness of a sound. Because especially bass sounds that are really low, they can sound really quiet, but if you add a lot of overtones to them, like an octave and a perfect fifth and a perfect fourth, these are the natural harmonic series peaks. That's what is evoked when you add clipping, analog distortion to a sound. And that is all over every record you've ever heard in your life. Like it's the subtle layer that makes the record feel loud. So if you want to make music at all, that's going to sound loud, you need to pay a lot of attention to saturation. And that usually happens after the compression and EQ. So this is like a channel strip. See what I'm saying? This is an essential lesson in music production. So last but not least, after those three devices, we put the sound into a space by applying stereo image processing. If you don't do this part, it would be like having an entire band right in front of your face, the drummer and everyone. It would just be like brutal. But with stereo processing, you can make the room feel, and you give it a bigger or smaller feel, put some different sounds in different kinds of spaces, and that's going to naturally create phase cancellation and a sense of warmth and offset between your left and right ears. It's going to do a lot for the song. So the composer and producer come together mentally in this stereo image process because the producer knows which instruments are supporting voices and which instruments are the lead voice. I mean, the mix, everyone's going to know this at this point, but the supporting voices, the backing tracks, they get lots of stereo processing. Those things should be surrounding the mono, more centrally tuned instruments, which are like the lead instruments, right? This might be, I mean, listen even to like a Motown record and you're going to hear those backing vocalists off on the side of the stage, you know, and that helps create a sense of space around the song. So that is another like absolutely crucial thing. If you don't do that, again, it's like you'll have a one mono-dimensional piece of music. And I know you've all felt that with your own music you're making in a computer. Like, why doesn't this sound big? It's all flat sounding, or it's like one dimension. You got to rotate that whole dimension 90 degrees. Have the bass sounds close to you and the mid-range sounds a little further out, and the high frequency sounds can be really spread out. Lots of reverb and delay on the higher frequency sounds. That's going to really create a shimmer around the whole environment, you know. Pushing those sounds out to the side is letting the lead instrument really poke through, you know, and that's going to create that environmental sense that you hear in records and maybe aren't hearing yet in your own tracks. This is a lot of information, guys, so I'm just clicking along, but we're going to be demonstrating and playing around in a few minutes, so thanks for your patience if this is boring. The producer will also turn those processed MIDI and otherwise tracks into stems. I don't know if you guys are doing this, but oftentimes you'll end up with like 10 or 15, 20 MIDI instruments all doing the strings and everything. That's songwriting and composing. You need to turn on the producer hat and you need to bake that stuff to audio. So you can flip it by, I'm just using street talk, I'm sorry. You need to resample those MIDI tracks to stems. You know what I mean? So there's a variety of ways to do that. The old school way to do it is just to solo the track on the mixer, hit S, and then bounce out your song. So you'll just get the drums. You know what I mean? And then you have an audio track. Now you drag it back in. Then you mute the MIDI, and I'll show you that in my session here too. I got muted out MIDI tracks, then the audio tracks. This allows me to actually produce the sounds. I can't produce a MIDI instrument. To produce the sound, you're gonna do things like reversing it, stretching it, like for like individual drum hits, put a little reverse snare drum once in a while. I mean, that's, you know who did that? Prince. Okay, every song. It's like every other snare drum. It's like that reverse snare before every other one. I mean, that's like an essential drum production technique, and that requires that audio flip. So have a bake stuff to stems and then further produce it. Also adding strip silence. This is a quick key command in Pro Tools for you Pro Tools users that you can just right click on, or you can just, strip silence is removing the clip entirely if there's not an instrument playing. So it's kind of like gating it in a way. So it's getting rid of anything that's not the thing, you know, the instrument you're trying to hear. And so that increases dynamics and overall punch to the mix, you know, because you don't want all these dead microphones floating around in the background. It just creates, it decreases your overall impact of each of your transients and such, you know, it's screwing up your noise floor, etc. So you want to, that strip silence thing is a cool thing you can do with audio stems too, that really, really pushes a song. Like, especially if you're trying to make something sound like really loud, like if you're trying to make what they call a banger nowadays, like dance music, like peak hour electronic music, you got to cook things to audio and delete all the audio that's not the instrument. And that'll create a maximum sense of silence in between the sounds to maximize impact. You know, overall dynamic range increases when you're cutting silent parts out. So then last but not least is just really the audio producer's job on a timeline when you're finishing a song is to go in and look at every single beat, every 16th note even, and saying, how are these sounds interacting? Because with real music, traditional music, musicians are listening to each other when they're playing, and they're filling the silent spots. Like a percussionist is filling the gaps, the silent moments in between the quarter notes and eighth notes. They're on the offbeats. And so you can evoke that if you just, as the producer, every good producer goes in, once all this stuff is done and starts getting out the eraser and articulating every moment. And I mean, that just sounds intense, but you don't need to do that if you're making country music. But if you're making like especially electronic music or music that's supposed to sound modern and really well produced, this is a step of your workflow. Okay, I'm almost done with the slideshow. It's 11:28, we're right on track. So another essential step of the producer is to use voicing and harmony. So for you American Composers Forum people, here's your chance to jump in and still really be essential in a good production environment. For instance, in any pop music song, the chorus is highly memorable and leaves behind a distinct emotional quality, right? That the chorus is the part you're like, oh my God, that song made me feel this way. And we all know, I mean, feelings are evoked by harmony. And so this is where the modern composer's skills are highly valuable. Voicing strings for the final chorus is not something that is easily faked. And a good producer either knows how to do that or knows the right person to arrange those notes. You can look in the liner notes of any good record and there's going to be like string arrangements by, and you're like, string arrangements, and you listen closely to the chorus, second chorus, especially if the big radio hit. And that's when like the harmonies, they start using all the keys in the piano, it's like big. So that's another thing that producers got to be hip to, and when and where that happens. So as a matter of fact, I got a really cool story. So one of my trumpet player in one of my bands wrote the song for Mystery Science Theater 3000 or 3000. It's a Netflix show. It used to be on cable access or something in the 80s in Minnesota, but then it got picked up by Netflix. So Netflix flies my buddy out to LA, and he sits in a studio and watches over Zoom an orchestra play his song that he wrote 30 years ago, and then with all mics on all the orchestra. So you can actually hire producers nowadays, hire orchestras, usually like in Eastern Europe, and they just send them the piece and say, okay, I'll see you in a week. And the orchestra spends a week practicing the piece, and then you get to watch on Zoom while they record your song, and then they send you the string parts. I mean, that's some totally cool stuff, but that's a modern way, especially during COVID, to get your string sections down if you don't have an orchestra nearby. Just a little tip. I wish I had the link for that, but you can just look it up, remote orchestra recording sessions. It's all over, especially like I said, like Latvia and stuff. They're Poland. They're doing that all the time. So here we go, pretty much last step. Most independent producers also mix and master their own songs. This is an important part. This ensures that their song will fit nicely into streams. It used to be like as on the radio, but now like if your song's on a Spotify playlist, it can't be quieter or louder than the other songs. It's got to fit right in there. This sounds nerdy, but if you're going to be a real modern producer at home during coronavirus, you better mix and master your own songs, or else they're never going to stack up. You're going to upload your own songs to Beatport or whatever, or Spotify, and they're going to get no plays because they don't have the right level and such. So mixing is where we get another pass at effects. And then we also group all of our stems together. You'll see this all in my session, where we get our whole song down to like 4 to 8 tracks. I have this reggae song here with maybe like originally 30 or 40 channels. Now it's down to like 7. So I can just mix it in these mix groups. That's what a mix engineer does. And then mastering just applies fades and gets it all completely ready to get handed off to the record label and the DJ or whatever. So the mastering engineer, I put, if anything, this is the step you want to pay someone to do. It's easy to do remotely. You can go to a place like Lander, it's called LANDR, and pay like $20 or $40 a song, and they'll just email it back to you. That's like probably the most like kind of ghetto way to do mastering, but it does work, and it does, people get pretty good results. I personally, honestly, I master people's music all the time. I do them for $50 a song, and I can make them sound ready for the radio. So I'm not promoting myself as that, but you can find people who have a lot of experience and a studio, because that's what it takes. You got to have a real studio, and you got to have experienced ears and know how to use your stuff. So mastering, whatever, I don't want to talk about that too long. So distribution. Okay, I keep saying last slide, but man, this is a lot of info. 11:32, I got to cut it here. But this is really an important question that doesn't get talked about enough. How are you going to get your music out there? I mean, I've, like I said, thousands of students the past 20 years, and not enough of their music ever got heard. It's sad because they didn't do this slide. You got to either, the traditional model is to get on a record label. You know what I mean? Find a record label that's going to like your demo, and then they'll master it and make it awesome and keep to handle it for you. But for the rest of us, you know, because if you're not on a label or whatever, and it's really hard to get on a label sometimes, you're going to check out some independent distribution options. I use Symphonic for my record label and my personal works. It's just, you know, they take a tiny cut and then they distribute it everywhere. TuneCore is the most popular one, though. They're the same. They just basically get your music on Spotify or iTunes. And I wrote, wait, is iTunes still a thing? I hope not. I wrote that in the slide. Sassy. I hate that software though, for real. So, but also Bandcamp. I think for independent artist albums, like for those of you out there who are like, I'm making my own artist album, this is my sound, I don't care if anyone likes it, I'm just making my own independent works because this is the sound that I have inside of myself that I have to get out. I'm going to make my own cover art. Everyone can download it directly for free or pay $2 or $10 and I get all the money. Bandcamp is awesome. I love Bandcamp. I think it's rad. I've released a lot of stuff on Bandcamp. A lot of famous people release stuff on Bandcamp just because it's like, hey, here's a free album, or give me $10, you know. A lot of people also like, you can, all your older works, you can put out a collection of old works on Bandcamp. That's really cool. Like if you've got like maybe an old album that you never released, that's still good. I mean, it's like, it's free, you know, it's cool. So then last but not least, I'll mention licensing platforms. For real composers who make lots of music, you're not just trying to like go on tour and be a rock star, you're trying to just write music all the time. So if you're going to do that, you got to be working with library service. Like this used to be called a jingle house back in the 70s. They just had libraries of recordings and they would sell them and market them to film and television and things like that. Nowadays it's people's Instagram channels, you know. Slam Academy's making a new movie every week and we need fresh original soundtracks. We're buying them from people all the time. You want to get on those lists, you go to a place like Taxi. They're like the biggest ever, harder to get onto though. But you can check out Midio, it's MDIIO, or Artlist.io is one I really like too, and they're in the US. But you could upload tons of tracks up there to them for free, and then they'll shop them around. And next thing you know, maybe you're getting a deal where they're licensing one of your tunes. And meanwhile, if you're making like 100 songs a year, you might as well license some of those, get them commercially placed or whatever. Again, being a music producer, it's not just about being a rock star or whatever, it's about making content. So with that, that was like a lot of talking. That's a good time for questions if anyone has any. Otherwise, I'm just going to flip around here. Cool. So let's take a look at some software. Thumbs up on seeing my Ableton Live software. Pretty sure that's a good thing. Cool. So thank you. This is the Ableton Live software, and I like to keep things pretty ambiguous as far as which software you're using, but I know it did come through in the email or something that people were like, what's up with Ableton Live? Because it is maybe less commonly used, especially amongst traditional composers. Producers use Ableton, you know, because Logic is great for composers, has great virtual instruments, and Pro Tools is great for recording engineers who are recording bands and stuff. But if you're going to produce your own sound, nothing in the world compares to Ableton. It is by far the best tool. And I'm not just saying that because I've drank the Kool-Aid like forever ago. It is amazing. And here's what makes it really special. You guys see this screen here from left to right? This is my composition. That's like a normal software. You move things left to right. That's cool. Aside from the fact that this software has a billion things that are really powerful to arrange and compose cool music, there's an additional environment here in Ableton, and this is called the session view. And it looks like a mixer, but there's also this upper area called the session view. And this is your palette where you get to mix colors. I'm going to talk more about that in a sec, but let's just like listen to this track. I'm going to show you guys, this is a little fun little trick I've got going here. I've got this software called Listen To, and it gives me a link. And for those of you who are interested in hearing this in full resolution, I'm going to go ahead and paste into the chat a little link you guys can hit. This is some super cutting edge technology, just so you know, because I'm about to send you guys wave full resolution audio through an additional tab in your web browser. All these instruments started as MIDI, and then I recorded them to audio. Or had the real trumpet player and melodica player. Real organ player. So this is the organ. I've got melodica, bongos, maracas, and so on. There's a mix group, bass. Here's the breakdown. That's Chuck Love on trumpet, my trumpet player. That's actually the guy that wrote the Mystery Science Theater 3000 theme song. Chuck Love, my boy. He also is a killer trumpet player. And the effects, got delay, reverb, and all that stuff on there. Put a space around it. Here's my EQ. Here's my compressors. Remember the channel strip? EQ, cut away the bad stuff. Compressors, push down the peaks. Gates, increase dynamics. So then look, the last but not least thing in the effects chain was the time-based effects. I have return tracks. These are just effects returns. This is a stereo echo. So it's like a dub echo, you know, because it's a reggae song. And then I've got an EQ on that too. Put an EQ on everything to cut the bad frequencies out, even the effects returns. So now you got to see the channel strip of effects. You also got to see the audio tracks. And look, if I go up here, I see that I have MIDI tracks, the original ones. This is MIDI. You know what I mean? Like the first day I made this, I was like, I think I want a beat to go like boo doo boom boom boom, and I clicked it in approximately, you know. And then after it sounded okay, I was like, man, we should get the microphones out, you know, and then like play the drum beat or whatever. In this case, I didn't even play that drum groove. I just recorded the MIDI instrument to audio. Just took the very MIDI track and just made a stem out of it, drug it back in. In this case, I froze it. This is all the drums on one track now. What that allows me to do is do cool tricks. Like check this out real quick. Let's solo those drums by hitting S. Let's listen to this simple little kick drum groove. Okay, now watch that. See how that, like, I got this last little hit with a little click. Here's some cool things I can do. You get these little fades. I can put a little crossfade. I could fade it out as long as I wanted to. I'm just going to fade that one click out. But then you know what else I'm going to do? I'm going to take this hit right here, and I'm going to separate it, and I'm going to reverse it. I just hit the letter R. It's just rendering it real quick. Cool little switch up there at the last little kick drum, have that thing reverse. I could even try that with my snare hits and everything else. I mean, another cool trick is maybe to now move this over. I could put a crossfade on those bass hits now. Look, if I move in on this, this is audio production, you know what I mean? So look, now I got a little crossfade between those two things, and I slid it early. These are little tricks you can do with audio. You can't do that stuff with MIDI, you know what I mean? And that's going to make that little change up even more interesting. Let's take it out of solo and see what happens. So it's a pretty quickie idea. Maybe then, let's fix it up, duplicate it and reverse it again and then stretch it out. Yeah, let's try that. That's going to be cool. See, this is the little micro editing part, and I went through all the slides of all the different things you do. You make it as MIDI, flip it to audio, apply effects, change stuff, record it to instrumentation, micro edit all the little elements. These are just little processes you go through to really produce a song and make it sound awesome. And so, I had that big reverb tail on there. I was kind of like, not feeling it totally. But, you get this idea. I can just wipe this out and be like, bye. We're back to normal. Cool. So that was just an experiment. Didn't work. And, embracing impermanence is also part of the art form. Not to get all zen on you, but you guys feel me on this? This is a cool little thing. Yeah.
Question.
Cool.
Can you take a moment and explain the audio movers technology and your process
Sure.
to reverb before the EQ?
Sure. Cool. Good questions. Two different questions. I like it though. Thanks for paying attention. The audio movers technology. I'm actually just got to quick switch my screen share to be my entire desktop because then it'll show the plugins. But if I hit this little guy, this dude. Pretty sure you can see that now. This is just a VST plugin. You can buy it. It's not super cheap, but it's the latest technology. It just came out a couple months ago from Audio Movers is the company. And this is an American guy. I'm not sure which state he's from, but he's pretty cool and pretty new and excited about this new tool he's invented. And it uses a variety of technologies behind the scenes, but it allows you to transmit any form of non-lossy full resolution audio through the internet in real time with a very small overall latency. It's really, I have it set to a half of a second. They could bring it way down to even a tenth of a second if I wanted at wave level audio. It's pretty amazing. And if you're familiar with streaming audio through Zoom or what at Google Hangouts, it's awful. And so this, especially, I teach most of my music stuff that I teach is sound design and mixing and mastering. So you can't do that without good audio. It's totally bogus. So that's that answer to your question. Audio Movers and Listen To is the name of the plugin. It's real cool. I actually use that in conjunction with another technology called Audio Hijack for my microphone. My microphone is on this right now. This allows me to put a little noise gate on here and a little denoiser and even some isotope ozone. Look at this. This is my voice right now. If you guys are curious about the latest in streaming audio technology, check out Listen To from Audio Movers, but also check out Audio Hijack, because now I've got nice little meters and everything for my whole signal, and I'm sending my microphone through another thing called Black Hole. Black Hole is, this goes on and on, but you've got to, this is not audio producer talk. This is streaming instructor talk. But if any of you guys are teachers and want to know more about that, you could email me, jp@slamacademy.com. That was a good little plug-in tangent. But the other question that was more music related had to do with the reverb earlier in the chain. I'll tell you what, all these rules are meant to be broken. And oftentimes new genres and new styles are invented when things are done wrong. Reggae, for instance, and dub reggae is a perfect example of that. Like putting a big saturator, like a tape saturator, just on the delay track and then like detuning it all weird. That's like essential to dub reggae. And that is technically like super wrong to do it that way. So in this case, I probably have saturated and compressed reverbs and delays. That's what's making the reverb be like, like really intensely thick and not just like a little pretty sense of space. That's by putting the devices in a weird order like that. And especially with saturation, which I'm sure I'll see on any of my tracks here. There it is. Look, here's right away. I click on my analog bass. Let's solo it. This is just a deep sub bass. There's barely in there. This is 2 notes. Without the saturator, it's really smooth sounding. But the saturator gives it some extra harmonics. Like we can even look at those harmonics with the spectrum. This is that producer talk for real. But if you're looking at that bass sound, here's the note. The bass player is playing these two notes. You can see the shadow. The first note, I don't want to sing in this crowd, is a C, and then the next note is a G, okay? But then these overtones are what are making it sound loud. Those are evoked by the soft clip limiter and the glue compressor, the drum bus, and the saturator. And in fact, even the filter that's in here has its own little built-in analog clipping. So all the devices, almost every one of them, was adding more saturation. So right now it's like woo woo, woo woo, more like a sine wave sound. But when you go ahead and add clipping, there's a little poke. I get more of that. I don't know, my track ran out of time there. I'll start that over. I'll over accentuate that. It almost starts getting really hot. There's a lot of it. I'm going to turn my output down and I'm just going to really drive it so you can hear that. This is tubey. So now, like if you had that bass is going to cut through the mix. Of course, it's got a totally different character now, but let's hear it together. That C, and especially that low G, like once you get below 60 or 70 hertz into the like 0 octave range, nobody's hearing any of that stuff unless you put a saturator on there. So Ableton has a pile of saturation opportunities and they're all pretty great. I am going to go ahead and back off on that, just a whole bunch. But you saw how that worked. Pretty cool, huh? So this is Ableton and audio effects processing. And I didn't even get to the part yet that makes Ableton so special. So it's 11:52 and I got to just make this last little demo so you can see this. When it comes to making great sounding music, oftentimes we're left stuck with just trying to find the right preset and just like dropping it onto the timeline and like hoping that it fits with everything. That is like the most alienating feeling in the world to me as an artist. And Ableton provides me and you with this opportunity to get away from that feeling of like trying to find the right preset. Here's how it works. If I hit tab and I look at this session view, I have this grid of clips up here. It's called the clip slot grid. And this is basically my color palette. It's like when I tell my students, I'm like, you don't see Bob Ross take a 5-gallon bucket of paint and just start applying it to the canvas. He's holding the palette and he's like, okay, these happy trees, it's fall, right? And so we're looking for the right browns and dark greens. You know, we're thinking about the colors we're going to mix before we put anything on the canvas. And for me, I'll spend anywhere from 10 minutes to 2 or 3 days on this session view creating clips and combining them, like mixing them together to see, oh, that bongos and maracas goes pretty well, but not when the bass is playing. I'm going to move that out of the way. And there becomes this relationship left to right with different parts that work together. And then you have these scenes over on the right. Let me move my zoom control panel here. And these scenes allow me to sequence different parts of the song together. Here's the groove. These are my parts I experimented with, and then when I'm ready for the organ to come in, I can just launch it. Here comes a breakdown. I don't know, let's try it. Breakdown. You know, because that scene, the last one, had stop buttons on the drums, so it stopped the drum track. And this is where I can kind of experiment. And I can even kind of evoke kind of this happy accident workflow. Like, you know how real music is made? Again, it's like people in the same room, like just playing and listening to each other, maybe, at least in a live context. Remember, the software is called Live. Maybe now you understand why. It's called Live because it allows you to improvise and think about parts in a real-time environment. And you never have to hit stop or anything. You can just keep clunking around until cool things happen and just maybe pushing colors together and seeing how they mix. And when something sounds neat, you can just boop, record it and record what you're doing and capture it right to this arrangement. And this becomes your canvas. And so this is a really, really powerful production environment. I highly encourage anyone who wants to make their own original sounding music. This is that's the thing, original sounding music. It's like, if you want to make music that sounds like for instance, say you're just trying to score a film quick and you're like, yo, I just need all the best strings and all the best everything right now at my fingertips. I don't want to make anything original. I'd probably use Logic, honestly. But if I wanted to create my own original works that are purely original, forget about any other software straight up. So especially, so I don't mean to be plugging it because I'm not necessarily plugging it. I'm just telling you, hey, if you ask me what's the most important tool in your music producer studio, it is not any old software. It's Ableton Live 10 Suite. So you guys can check that software out if you want. You can get an educational discount of 50% off of it anytime. And also they're running a special free 90-day version of it. So anyone right now can have it for free, all features for 90 days. Just go to ableton.com and download that puppy. I'll type it into the chat for fun if that hasn't already happened. And that will get you a lot of good tips. And I'd love to open this up to questions. I was going to say, when you do download the Ableton, the free trial, it comes with all these great lessons built in. So you can just run the lessons for fun and learn all the stuff I know just like while you're stuck at home. I'm just looking at this chat and I'm like, wow, this is really lots of good chatting and questions and stuff. I'm totally here for questions if anyone has any.
Yep, there's a question. Is stereo imaging and panning the same? And how good a DAW is Cubase?
That's a couple of really great questions. So panning is stereo imaging, but there are lots of other things that fall into stereo imaging that are not just pan. As a matter of fact, for a lot of modern producers, you don't pan the mixer very much, just a little tiny bit. The stereo image is the echoes and reflections that are surrounding the sound. So for instance, like anytime in real life, when you hear somebody talking to you in real life, like if you can remember back when that happened the last time when you were in the same room with someone, you're actually hearing many versions of their voice. First, you hear the dry signal because that's the shortest path from their mouth to your ears. And then immediately after that, you start hearing all the reflections from the surfaces in the room. And sound is actually really slow relatively. It's like 1,000 feet per second approximately. So what that means is that even in a small room, you start to really hear a pretty big differential of all these different things hitting you in different times. And when you're in a big room, it's like, that's what's happening. The reflections are getting all smeared. And so that's really stereo imaging. So that is most commonly evoked with delays and reverbs. So if you're just looking in your audio effects collection in Cubase or whatever, they got great reverb and delay in there. You could also look up chorus, flanger, phaser. These are stereo imaging effects that are very effective, especially for mono sounds. Like microphone sounds, that's mono, it's a microphone. How about like the trumpet in this track? That took tons of delay and reverb to make it sound soft. Otherwise, it's like somebody playing a trumpet right in your ear hole. Oh my God. So you got to put those reflections in there. That's going to make it sound bigger and also, again, cause some phase cancellation to smooth it out, kill some of those big peaks that are maybe a little too sharp. Those reflections pile up and start to phase cancel out those nasty frequencies. And the other question is, how good of a DAW is Cubase? Cubase is awesome. And I apologize for not bringing it up earlier. If I was a producer and I did not use Ableton, Cubase would be really high on my list. It's a really, really powerful software. And I think it's, as far as quality on every level, it's top shelf.
Yeah, follow-up question. Which is better, mixing on studio equipment or normal speakers / headphones?
I think really, here's another great coronavirus answer. Really proper, really good mixing. You should do on nice studio monitor speakers in a nice, quiet, acoustically treated room. Okay. You want to be an equilateral triangle away from the speakers, meaning if they're 5 feet apart, you want to be 5 feet from them. And you want the most absorption in the room as far as bookshelves and whatever as you can. But hold on. If you're in the coronavirus outbreak, you should check out SonarWorks software. This is another software that I use. I have the plugin on my track here. I'll show it to you. And this is a headphone EQ, basically. This is amazing software. It's like $100 or free during the coronavirus. Go to sonarworks.com and just download it for free. They're giving it away for free right now. And then you can just type in what make and model of headphones you're wearing. I'm wearing Sennheiser HD25s, and it'll go ahead and apply an EQ curve on everything for you. Oof, that is just so good. This is brilliant. I mean, there's been software like this in the past, but it has sucked. Pardon me, it's not nearly as high quality as SonarWorks. SonarWorks, it just sounds awesome. And I'm nailing mixes all day with the SonarWorks with the headphones. Even if you are stuck with some DJ headphones or whatever, it'll just put a big crazy curve on there for you, and it's pretty amazing. So I really stand by this software also too. So that's a free deal that I highly recommend. But yeah, in general, speakers are always by far the best. And then I did have the chat up, and there was another question. Here I come.
Yep, Jason said, I was under the impression that clipping was always bad. Can you go more into why it would be desirable in certain cases?
Yeah, check it out. This is I was told that too, Jason. So I went to like audio engineering school in the 90s and stuff, and they were like, yeah, clipping is bad, right? You know why? Because that was the dawn of computer technology. And inside of a computer, if you go into the reds while you're recording, you have destroyed the recording. All bets are off, go home. You can't clip when you're recording digital sounds. But simulated clipping, like in other words, analog modeling, which happens inside of plugins, is emulating clipping, but on an analog medium, not clipping it digitally like in a computer where it just cuts the peak off and gives you crust. Analog clipping is like warm saturation evoked from a tape deck or from some solid state transistors and resistors and such overheating. That kind of clipping evokes energy into the natural harmonic series. So instead of it just being nasty noise in the upper frequency that the digital clipping evokes, saturation, in other words, analog modeled clipping in plugins or in devices, it only stimulates harmonics that are in key with the music. So when the bass player plays different notes, those new peaks move along, because that's one of the magical things about analog clipping and how it works. So look up, for instance, plugins like Sound Toys. They are the very best distortion effects ever. Sound Toys. Otherwise, just any plugin suite within your DAW will have a good saturator or an overdrive. Those are the main words used with that are associated with analog modeled clipping. So that was a lot. This is a lot of info, but I'm full of it. So, but it is a couple minutes after. Was there any other questions that anyone wants to hit me with?
We don't have any more question at this point, but we do hear from everyone that you answered the question so amazingly. Thank you. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise, and your production sounds amazing. And thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for everyone attending today's session. If you have further questions we haven't answered during the session, please send them to jp@slamacademy.com. Next week, we will have monetizing a live stream performance webinar at May 14, 11 a.m., same time next Thursday. And the same day, we will have town hall at 5 p.m. And for more events and details, please visit composersforum.org/events. Take care, everyone, and I hope to see you again in our next series.